Welcome back to Let's Talk. Let's talk about Young America's Foundation. Today I have the national chairman of YAF with me today, Jasmyn. Jasmyn, why don't you give the people a little introduction about yourself and who you are?
Hi everyone, I'm Jasmyn Jordan. This Saturday, I'm graduating from the University of Iowa, double majoring in political science and international relations with a minor in journalism, and then I'm going to go back home and I've been applying to and interviewing for some positions in the journalism field.
That's awesome. That's great. And so let's just jump right into it. So before we talk, see, I've always called it YAF. I feel like a lot of people do that, but it is Young America's Foundation. And before we get to YAF, I want know a little bit more about you. How did you get into politics? You know, that's not something that a lot of people, like young people, have to kind of have that drive for it. They have to have that passion for it. And so what really gave you that drive and passion?
So originally, I had no interest in politics whatsoever. I always thought it was boring and divisive. Like my mom, she was involved in the Republican Party in our town, and she was always working on campaigns. I remember being young, and she was doing all the door knocking, putting the brochures on the doors, and I absolutely hated it. I just wanted to go home, especially when it was like super cold outside.
Yes.
Um, but once I got to campus, I was definitely really frustrated, and I didn't expect to be. Because every single place I went, anywhere on campus or even downtown in Iowa City, there were rainbow flags, Black Lives Matter flags everywhere. I got really lucky to attend this school because it was like one of the only schools in the country that didn't have a mask or vaccine requirement. So I personally chose not to wear a mask, but a lot of people were just kind of weird about it. So coming in fall 2021 as a freshman was definitely just difficult, social wise, with just how people were acting, but also kind of just what was being taught in the classrooms and was also present in student organizations. And so for the first time, I had felt like my beliefs were really, really challenged, because I'd grown up Christian my entire life. My family has had conservative values instilled in me, and I just never felt a need, at least when I was in high school, to really have to like present those. And so
Mm-hmm.
out of nowhere, I got an email from Young Americans for Freedom from the chapter on campus, and they said that they were bringing Vice President Mike Pence to campus. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I got there super early. I was like the first person in line, got to sit in the front row, and there was like 500 to 600 people there. It was just really awesome to be surrounded by such a big group of people who shared my beliefs and also were pushing back against the radical stuff that was going on campus. And I immediately knew I wanted to join the organization, so I went to their first meeting. And after attending the first meeting, I was just so in awe of like how they presented themselves. It was really interesting because, again, I had no interest in politics, but they presented it in a way that was fascinating to me. I really liked that politics was a mix of all my interests. I have so many different interests. There's, history, writing, current events, international stuff, like all of that. And so I immediately knew I wanted to join the board and worked really hard by attending all their meetings, as many speaker events and tablings as I could. And I ran for secretary for the spring semester, and I got that position, which was really awesome. I've worked my way up to being vice chair, then chair on campus for several years, and then last winter I was selected to serve as national chairwoman.
That's amazing. And I feel like you tell the story of a lot of high schoolers because I kind of went even through this as well. I was homeschooled my whole life. And so I was like doubly, not having to really go and stand up for my beliefs because I was constantly surrounded by people who believed the same thing as me or adults who had kind of already been through that stage of life that you're talking about. And then so I didn't go to college, but I would do, local theater here in town, which was basically my social, output. That's how I kind of got to know people. And quickly I just realized, I am the odd man out. All this time I thought I was the majority. And honestly, I think we still are, but sometimes we are just a very silent majority, especially at this age group, because a lot of people don't want to come out and talk about this stuff. And so something like YAF, being on college campuses where it's like, hey, like if you go out and talk about the stuff, we're gonna have your back. Because, when I was going through that kind of stuff and I wasn't in college, or I knew people that were in college, but they were against all that stuff. And, a while ago, I remember going to Iowa State and I interviewed somebody, and he was talking about, how he tries to have Christian conservative meetings on his campus. And this was, I mean, probably about 4 years ago. He was trying to have meetings, and they would, put them in closets and like put them in back rooms, and people who were, liberals and had all of this, it was the like Iowa Jane Collective, those types of people. They were meeting in like these great buildings. Like the college, Iowa State was just giving them whole entire buildings to work with. And this guy was telling me, like, I'm trying to have these meetings and they're putting me like in the back room of the back room, in like the dead of night, and we're trying to talk. And so talk to me a little bit more about YAF for people who don't know what that is. What is YAF? Or
Yeah,
Young American
so
Freedom. I keep
yeah.
calling it YAF. That's just a habit of mine.
There's two YAFs. So Young America's Foundation, they're like the parent organization of Young Americans for Freedom. Young Americans for Freedom is the various chapters across the country for college and high school students. And what they do is fight for freedom and promote conservative ideas, bringing speakers to campus, doing different activism initiatives. You can either do one of the many ones that National YAF offers, like the 9/11 Never Forget Memorial, which is where you put up 2,977 flags to commemorate all the lives lost during September 11th.
Mm.
I think it's especially crucial because so many more people are being born after 9/11 and have no idea the importance of it. They also have Freedom Week to celebrate the fall of the Berlin Wall, Stand for Israel Memorial, where we put up flags to honor the hostages. And then my favorite one is the Transitioner Table, because our chapter actually came up with that initiative, and YAF has adapted it to be one of their national initiatives. And so I, again, was very frustrated with how our administration completely ignored all the adversity that we were facing and all the impediments to our First Amendment rights. And so something I noticed, they were promoting every single transgender holiday possible, and they did nothing to celebrate detransitioners. And I never knew about detransitioning until I watched What is a Woman from Matt
Mm.
Walsh. And that just really opened my eyes to so many things that I never knew were a thing, and I felt like not enough people were talking about. So our chapter, eventually, after we hosted Matt Walsh, Chloe Cole, who's a detransitioner, we got to be the first chapter to host her. And so kind of
Wow.
the precursor to that, when we were preparing for a Matt Walsh event, coming up with activism related to his speech, because he was continuing his What is a Woman tour, we decided to do a detransitioner visibility table. And so we set up a table, trifold, with the stories of male to female and female to male detransitioners, and Chloe Cole was one of those people that we were sharing their story. And so we had some people, walk by our table and cuss at us. We had like 3 protesters holding like trans rights signs, but the craziest interaction that we had was this guy. He came up to our table with his backpack, and instead of having, your laptop, binder, pencils, whatever for school, he
Mm.
had over 40 of our Matt Walsh posters crumpled up, and he dumped those onto our table with a trash bag, and he was like, clean this mess up. And it was just so
Oh my
ridiculous
gosh.
how, we're at school to focus on, education, preparing for our careers, and so many people are choosing to do anything but that.
Well, it's fascinating to me because you hear so much, like let people be who they are. And you see all of these conversations people have, let people be open. We need to have more conversations. Unless you disagree with me, then I want you to not have this conversation. Then I want you to not have this person. Like you see all these interviews, like when a Matt Walsh is coming to a college campus, or like a Charlie Kirk, and people are like, I don't want him here. I don't want them here. Well, why? And there's literally never any actual rational answer. The answer is basically just, my parents never told me the word no, and so now I just can't comprehend what it means to actually stand here and listen to people that disagree with me. Because what you were talking about, people coming up to you and cussing at you and all this stuff, it kind of sparked this question as you were talking. Because I went to see Matt Walsh. I told you that right before we started. I saw him in Wisconsin, and I saw him at Iowa City, because big Matt Walsh fan. I mean, the movie What is a Woman changed my life, genuinely, because it opened my eyes up. I was like right in the thick of just being honestly drowned in this sea of like, oh, I want to be nice to people, but I disagree with this, and not understanding. And watching Matt Walsh's What is a Woman, and watching just the absolute horrors that these people have gone through and that people are putting children through just for, funds and money, and just because they're psychopaths, really, was just so eye-opening to me. And when I went there, the protests, I remember we were waiting in line and they all came in a line. And as we are on one side, which ironically was the right side, and they were on the left side, that was pretty ironic. As we were on the right side and they were on the left side, we're waiting to get in and they're just yelling at us and screaming at us. But the difference between somebody like me and somebody like you is I get to go home. I get to watch this event and then I get to go home afterwards. What is it like not being able to go home because this is your college, you go to school with these people? I mean, you're holding these events and then the next day it's like math 101 and you're sitting, right next to some of these people who were just, calling you, terrorists and killers and all this crazy stuff. Like, what is that like?
That reminds me of so many stories coming at once. The first one, I'm trying to think of it chronologically. The first one was, okay, so University of Iowa, as a student organization, we get to send out 2 mass emails per semester. So we've been hosting 2 speakers per semester, so we have an email for each speaker. So we had sent out our mass email for Matt Walsh, and I was in class with this guy. It was a political science class, and so, I'm working on my stuff. I'm literally talking to him. He's working on his stuff. And the mass email comes out. Everyone gets it on their phone at the same time. He looks at it, storms out of the room, doesn't come back for like 10 minutes. And then he comes back and he can't, for the rest of the semester, which is like 2 months at that point, for the rest of the semester, he couldn't even look me in the
Oh my
eye,
gosh.
even though we had been friends. I'd interviewed
Yeah.
him for an article I was writing before, like we were good friends before. And, he's going on to be our future lawyers because he goes to law school now. And it's just so crazy how it's like these people are supposed to be, our future politicians, lawyers, doctors, but they can't even tolerate or help people, which is, what they're pursuing. The other incidents are kind of more serious. So the very first personal attack I had for my beliefs was right after I became secretary. We were hosting Kellyanne Conway, and so we were advertising for that, flyering, writing chalk advertisements. And so at the time, I was in a group chat called the Black Sparta group chat, which was a group chat of over 1,000 Black students and alumni to the purpose was to connect, network, share opportunities. And so out of nowhere, someone took a photo of one of our advertisements, sent it in the group chat, and they started complaining about how they didn't feel safe being a Black person in Iowa just because we were bringing someone who was in support of President Trump. And so out of nowhere, someone else was like, we have a YAF member in this group chat. And it's like, out of 1,000 people, I don't know why this person thinks, and I also don't even know the person who was talking about me. And so what they did was go through all of Iowa YAF's Instagram followers. They found my profile, and at the time in my Instagram bio it said I was secretary of Iowa YAF, and so they screenshotted my Instagram profile and sent it to that group chat.
Oh my
Over
gosh.
1,000 people, and for over 4 hours they were calling me a white supremacist, a Nazi, a bigot. They said that they were holding me accountable for my actions against the Black community. And I didn't say anything at all. These people were I didn't know a majority of these people. One of the people I did know, it was kind of insulting. So she was like, oh, maybe Jasmyn doesn't know what YAF is. And that was insulting because I'm literally a board member. I'm also in an honors class with this girl. So it's I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
And so at the time, I was on the YAF executive board, and I was also on the Black Student Union executive board. And so all of that mess spilled into the Black Student Union exec board group chat. And there's this girl someone was like, we have a white supremacist on our board. What's going on? And then someone else was like, yeah, it's Jasmyn. I'm so scared she's going to hate crime me. And this is when I was a freshman. The girl who said that was a senior. And it's these people are so ridiculous at that point. And so they wanted to have an emergency board meeting, and I didn't want to go because I was trying to focus on finals, and all these people are senior, because my position on the Black Student Union board was first year representative, and so pretty much everyone else was much upper in class than I was. And so and the who was it? The advisor, she had like plans, but she had to drop all of them just to have this emergency meeting. And so she had called me, and I told her what happened because again, I wasn't going to go. And so she said that she represented Black students of all viewpoints and that she would bring all of my thoughts to the meeting. And so then she would call me in a couple days and explain like what the conversation was like. And so she called me in a couple days, and she said that if I wanted to continue serving on the executive board, that I'd have to have a meeting with all of them about how Black students can have different viewpoints. And I thought that was extremely stupid, and so I just left them and continued focusing on YAF because it's like it's
Yeah.
in my opinion, it's innate knowledge that anyone can have any viewpoint, and it, of course, it doesn't matter their background. And it just was so shocking how no one tried to understand. They just immediately assume because I have these beliefs that I believe a certain kind of thing, rather than having a conversation and saying why I believe what I believe.
I mean, I that's something that I've never understand. It's like, for example, with me being, a woman and coming out against, abortion and things like that. It's like people can't comprehend that I am a woman and I don't believe that, babies should be murdered for any reason. It's like that. It's like how Jasmine, we're not gonna lie. How are you? How are you, girl, Jasmine, how are you racist? It's just these conversations because when you really get down to like the actual root of the conversation, there's just never any real argument because when you have both science and faith and just your morals to root to your core on your side, and you're going to have these conversations with people and you really get down to it, there's absolutely no argument other than emotion. That's why you watch people, come and blow up at your tables or blow up at you instead of coming to you and going, hey, Jasmine, I really want to have a conversation with you about, what is YAF, or asking you, like, what do you guys do here? Because at the end of the day, from what I'm hearing, YAF just really encourages, people of high political status, and yes, they are usually, and 99.9999, usually 100% conservative, but they come to these college campuses to talk to everybody. And it's like you watch people, and I've seen different clips of some students recognizing that and going, I don't agree with you on this, but I really want to hear your perspective. Because again, I didn't go to college, but I feel like that's what college is about. It's about finding who you are. It's about setting stone in your beliefs. Like, do I really believe this? And why do I believe this? And having these honest conversations. Because that kind of brings me to my next question is, you talked a little bit about what are students like. I mean, what are your teachers like? Because I've seen in videos too where the teachers are at these events protesting. Because again, going back to that one in Iowa City, the leader of the protest was a teacher. I remember it was a grown adult. I'm like, this is embarrassing. You are a grown man. This isn't even technically for you. This is a college campus. Why are you here? You know what I'm saying? Like, you're in your 50s. So talk to me. I mean, do you get a lot of strife from your teachers? Have you found people like backlashing against you?
So I haven't had any issues personally with my teachers. At least I use like rate my professor and also try to just look up the teachers and kind
Yes.
of just see how they are. Um, Also, luckily, I haven't like had any personal, like I haven't had to write something like super politically charged or had to do like a
Mm.
conservative take on anything. So I've been kind of lucky with that. And but I have noticed that my teachers are, most of them are super left leaning. One of my teachers, she was my international conflict teacher. The day after Trump was elected, she was just like, she was sad the whole class time, and I figured that was it. She didn't say anything, but then out of nowhere, like, it wasn't even relevant to our slides or anything, she was saying that Trump was going to mess up the whole international world order and everything with that. And also, that same teacher was telling us that Al Jazeera is a super reputable source to use. And I thought that was so crazy, especially, around that time, Al Jazeera was holding a Jewish person hostage in their house. Um, I'm trying to think of some of the other examples. Pretty much just teachers having meltdowns during class has been my main experience. I remember a couple weeks ago, one of my professors, she kept freaking out because of all the new legislative stuff that's being done in Iowa
Mm.
about DEI. She kept like trying to hide the fact that she wanted to say the word diversity and everything, was talking about why it's important to teach that. And then she was going on a whole rant about how she's part of this research group and how she's like one of the only women, and she was talking about how women aren't being picked enough, and she was, you know, kind of just playing the victim card the whole time, and was saying that, you know, no one cares about women, and was just going on a whole rant about that. So it's mainly um, pretty much just been teachers using like left leaning sources. They're kind of, I don't think I've had a teacher cry, but kind of just often whining about Trump. Um, those have been my main experiences.
I I just you know, like when Trump got elected both the first time and this time, you know, you see a lot of videos of like one that really pops out to me are these parents the day after Trump got elected and these children had to go back to school. I don't know if you've seen this. The mom is like filming her kids and she looks at them and is like, I just need to warn you that Trump is president and you're going to have to be super careful at school and like you might have to call me to come get you. It's like it's like scaring kids like pardon me. It's like scaring kids to the sense where like they're scared to even talk to somebody who votes a different way than them or talks a different way than them. And it's sad to see this in college campuses because it's like I said earlier, it's where you go to really evolve as a human being and to learn why you are the way you are and to have these conversations. And it's like if you really believe what you're saying, why not go to these events that you're holding? And there's open question time. Why not ask them a question like, "Hey, I don't agree with you, but I want to hear what you have to say." But like why not just go up and ask them instead of watching a 10-second TikTok of Matt Walsh or whoever taking like different sound bites of him and putting it together. It's like, it honestly reminds me of people don't want to know the truth. I feel like I'm sure you've seen a lot of that as well, where it's like people don't really actually want to have conversations with you. Like when you actually are starting to talk to people and answer their questions, and once they realize there's absolutely nothing they can really say back, there's just genuinely, you know, no more conversation. And going back to when I saw Matt Walsh at the University of Iowa, you know, and we were talking about the protesters, I remember when my husband and I first got there, we got there super early just in case because you know, I am my father's daughter. And so if somebody were to try to come up to me and be like that, like I'll be like that right back. Okay, we'll have a conversation real quick. And so I was like, he was like, we need to get there early. And so I got there early. But, you know, as I was telling you, these people are coming in. I mean, the ruckus outside was crazy. And I remember just not feeling anger, but this like overwhelming sense of, well, why don't you come in and talk? Or if you want to talk, like, let's talk. And I remember coming outside, and these people were almost getting into like literal fist fights. I remember having to stand next to this woman because this other woman was genuinely trying to beat her up. I remember, and I'm just like, one, it's a college campus, okay? We're not like this is ridiculous. This is an extracurricular for students to learn different viewpoints or their own viewpoint and share it with them, okay? Two, it's like I'm watching people physically get violent, like we're in the frickin' purge. I'm like, what is happening here? You know, this is, you know, Iowa. We need to chill out. How do you go about handling that? Because I mean, now you've been around it a bunch, you've seen it a lot. I mean, how do you A, keep your cool, but B, like, what do you guys do as an organization? Like, how do you guys go about handling it? Do you try to stay out of it? Like, how does that go?
At the, are you meaning like how we handle it at the events?
Yes.
For us, at events, we honestly have not had to deal with too much, mostly because we all were like in the background. Some of us did like open the door a little bit and see all that was going on. And, like I still have a video on my phone, but you could just hear there. Weren't they like banging on drums and stuff
The
inside?
University of Iowa, like, marching band came out and were like blocking cars as well, and we talked a little bit about that. But inside, yeah, there was like instruments that they brought in as well, and they were shouting and it was awful. And I think this was the event too. I think where Matt said straight up, like, if they want to come in and ask me a question, like somebody can come in and ask me a question, and nobody came in because there's no argument. But anyways, keep going.
Yeah, and so pretty much, we welcome anyone to come in. We say all of our advertising beforehand, and then if anyone is able to hear it over all the noise,
Yeah.
they're more than welcome to ask a question. We have all of our like ushers trained ahead of time. They're all the YAF members. We have them trained ahead of time to, escort people to their seats. Trying to think if there's anything else specifically, but I know before for this specific event, National YAF, Bree, she was from National YAF and came to help out. She had me like pray, I prayed with her and then like prayed before the event, for everything to go well, and it did, which I was surprised. I expected there to be some disruptors inside, and luckily, everything went very smoothly. Except afterwards and kind of beforehand, with the marbles and everything too, and also at some other events we've had, especially it's always been like our more like gender themed events that we have the protesters and just people who are outwardly aggressive, because when we had Chloe Cole, there was this woman who we couldn't we don't think she was a teacher on our campus. She might have been a teacher at another nearby campus, but she wore a giant like rainbow flag, and was making like a whole bunch of angry gestures and faces while Chloe was speaking, because we got to have dinner with Chloe after, and she was talking about how crazy that lady was. So with the Chloe Cole event, we had protesters arrested there, and like 7 or 8 of them, and one of them was like a 40-year-old woman, and she came to our Paula Scanlon event that we had in spring of last year, and so her and her daughter were very aggressive. My friend who was holding the microphone for the Q&A part, this 40-year-old woman was towering over him and trying to snatch it from him. And her daughter, okay, I don't know how to describe this appropriately, but her daughter, who is literally employed by the university, and the daughter got arrested in the fall for chaining herself to Kinnick Stadium. So she came to the Paula Scanlon event with a pad on her head, and wrote, I think, like, trans rights matter or something like that. Like, it was like bopping off her head. So yeah.
What does that even? I don't even. What does that even have to do with that?
Yeah.
What does that
Okay.
even have to do with that?
Because Paula Scanlon, so she had to swim. She had to share a locker room with William Thomas, the male swimmer, and so because Paula was, because our speaking title, it was like how the left. It was something about how the left like erases women, and so again, they like to bring anytime, because we just had Alicia Krause this semester speak about how the left hates women, and they again try to bring the trans argument into that. So anytime we literally just try to have like a woman focused speech, it's always about, they always try to bring in some, instead of, again, having the discussion, that's, something we've talked about this whole time, they just immediately, again, are assuming what we're speaking about, and assuming, like, what we're trying to get at when we are speaking out, something completely different. They're always trying to detract from the real issue.
Yes.
And like you said, they're always trying to hide themselves from the truth.
So how do you guys handle their events? I mean, do you guys go and dump trash on their tables? Do you guys protest those? I mean, how do you guys go about that?
Yeah, we've never, what they do to us, we never do to them. I've personally never attended any of because first off, like, the left, they're always trying to protest our events, tabling, yell at us, whatever, but they like hardly, do as much as we do on campus. And so I've never attended any of the like Democrat or whatever themed events, but I have been working with CAMRA, which is the Committee for Accurate Reporting in the Middle East. I've been a fellow for them, and so that is focused on pro-Israel activism. So I've attended actually some pro-Palestine events. When I went to a protest with a YAF member, we literally, didn't counter protest or anything. We literally just stood there and were just watching what was going on because we were curious because they were doing weekly protests right after October 7th. And so this guy somehow recognized who I was and he was like super mad. And he was like, "You need to get out of here. You don't belong here." As like we're literally just watching the protest. It's a free country. And he was like, "Well, we know that you're going to harass us, even though we literally were there for
You're
a
like,
good
I'm
half
just
hour."
standing here.
Yeah. And so then he started screaming at us about trans rights, kind of what I literally just mentioned. He was screaming at us about trans rights, even though we were talking about the Israel-Palestine issue. And then he started like, I don't even know. He was screaming and more about like free Palestine and everything. And then there was a woman who actually heard this conversation because it was like so loud in the middle of the streets. And this woman said that she knew one of the hostages, and she started telling her story. And then those two people ran away from the conversation. Like they literally skedaddled from the conversation that we were trying to have.
It was just like, I'm just gonna continue standing here and watching like I've been doing this whole time.
Yeah. And so then I've attended some of the other like pro Palestine events, but rather than like screaming obviously or spilling 20,000 marbles, I usually like to just, kind of take it all in and just see, what information they have, what sources they're using, and also what they believe. Because like, the purpose of going to events, anything that disagrees with you is to strengthen your beliefs. And so what I've done is written op-eds about why I believe what they're doing is wrong. So like the most recent thing was Iowa City Public Library had a Palestine Children's Story Hour.
Oh
And
boy.
I am very passionate about like working with the youth, and I work at a daycare back at home. I used to work at a library and helped in the children's section. I was super passionate about going to the children's story hour back when I was younger, so I was just like absolutely appalled that this was happening. And so I had went and the speaker and see what I did when I was writing this. I was like curious about like who the speaker was, and so looking into her, she was reading these stories to other city libraries, and she had also spoken at a school board meeting. And at that school board meeting, she called Israel colonizers, said that they were genocidal, said that they were occupying, and she was trying to push for the school to teach about what she called the indigenous Palestinian people. And so at the story hour, she was wearing a keffiyeh, and before she read the two books, she kept telling the kids these literal, like, most of them were like, I would say about like 3 years old, and there was just a couple of them. But she was saying, she was like, pay attention to what I'm wearing and what you see in these stories. And they're both the grandpas in the stories had keffiyehs on, but one of the books, it had a whole bunch of like watermelon and Palestine flags. And so the first book, it seemed like really innocent at first, and then it was about this little girl who was trying to grow an olive tree because olives are like symbolic to people in the Middle East. And so out of nowhere, like she turned the page and it was like all dark, and it said that this something like the soldiers came in and trampled and stole
Oh man.
everything, including the olive tree. So it's just like, these dark images that they're, it didn't explicitly say Israel, but, it was very
Making it look
obvious.
like a horror movie almost to these
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah. And then the second one, that one really, the second story really stuck out to me because, so basically there's a little girl, so there's a classroom, and so the teacher has assigned everyone to look and see what country they're from and kind of explain it. And so the little girl in that story says she's from Palestine, but she doesn't see it on the map. And the teacher's like, "Oh, Palestine doesn't exist." And so the girl's really frustrated and turns to each member of her family and asks why this is. And so when she turns to her grandpa about that, he draws her a map, and the map is it's shaped like the state of Israel. And he's like, "This is what Palestine is." And the quote literally is, "Your teacher needs teaching."
Oh
And
boy.
then he's like, "Take this map and show your teacher and the students in teach them. And I just, when it said your teacher needs teaching, I was like, that is just so appalling. Because it's like, just because you think the teacher's wrong doesn't mean you're right. And they very much were not right in that
That's
case.
awful. That's aw I've I just had my daughter about a year ago. So she is a year and 2 months now. And I think that is has genuinely become my biggest fear is how people handle children and the youth. Because I mean, what you're explaining is you're basically making this a caricature of a horror movie to these children when this is, real life situations. These are real life people, but almost like what you're talking about with, the gender situation. I don't know about you, but when I was younger, when I was a kid, like this isn't something that I ever was around or dealt with ever. I remember even the word gay was like something my friends and I said, and then we'd be like, oh, we shouldn't say that. Okay, you know what I'm saying? Like that was the vibe. That was the vibe. And so, but even with, being transgender, it wasn't until I turned 16, I was finally around. Like there was one person out of everybody I knew that was transgender, and that was it. Now, it's like I'm on my Facebook page scrolling or I'm on Instagram and it's like this person who I went to a homeschool co-op with, who was one of my best friends, her name was Connor, is now like KP and she's a dude. It's like, how are you a dude? I knew you in high school and you had crushes on men because you were a chick, okay? Like I'm seeing all of these women or sometimes even dudes, but I just feel like I see it more, with women trying to be dudes or whatever. But as I'm seeing this stuff and I'm just like, it's taking over. It feels like in mass. And so you were even talking about it too. You see a lot more anger when it comes to the gender situation, I guess. What do you think it is about that really hits people, with the heartstrings? Because I feel like it's become an intensely emotional situation where there's a lot of times, sometimes you can have a conversation with people, but when it comes to gender and all that stuff, I mean, like the conversation's done. Like there is no talking. So what do you think it is about that issue that hits people so hard?
I think it's really tied to their soul, like to their and like core being. Like it's really an identity crisis because again, me growing up as well, I never heard of transgenderism or people really being able to change their gender. I was also homeschooled up until middle school. I'm very blessed that I had, no issues with leftist propaganda in middle school or high school, because I know that definitely is not the case now. It's much more different. But I really think that people are just struggling to find where they belong. And they feel like there's a community within transgenderism, and they're trying to do anything that they can to, maybe get the attention that they seek, or really just try and find friends. And they also kind of see it as something trendy too, I feel like, because I feel like, especially after COVID, I feel like that really made this a bigger issue too, is like people, dealt with so many things during COVID with so much loss, especially like loneliness was a big thing.
Mm,
And I think a lot of the transgender culture was online, and people kind of just got absorbed in those communities. I feel like they're also, what I've heard from detransitioners especially, is that the communities are just so toxic but so enticing, because they claim they'll do anything for you, that they'll be your friend, and they really especially prey upon very young impressionable people. Chloe Cole and Laura Becker, who I've talked to personally, they said that online was really where they found the whole radicalization of, Laura Becker
mm-hmm.
especially calls it a cult, because, and they really encourage like young people, to not be on phones, not be on the internet, because that is really what changed it all for them. And then also both of them have autism, and so again, just struggling with interactions. And then that kind of, I really like that they speak on that issue. I feel like the transgender cult is, really trying to, again, prey on impressionable people and prey on people who kind of are struggling with kind of their mental health, but also just their different abilities and their ability to like connect with people, especially, you know, again with COVID. I feel like still to this day, like everyone really lost their ability to connect with others. And so, and also another thing that I feel like I've noticed, especially with my generation, is that everyone wants instant gratification, and
Mhm.
everyone, you know, doesn't want to actually put in the work for it. They want to do things quick and easy. And by, you know, posting like the trans flag on their Instagram story, they know that they'll instantly get a whole bunch of likes on that. Um, or it's just, again, another community that they can be a part of, and that's what people have been really seeking.
Well, it's almost like, what you're describing is almost like when you get into a bad relationship with a guy, and at first he's really great, he's really nice, he makes himself to be out to be some savior almost in a way. And usually those types of guys prey on insecure girls or girls who don't have really a sense of who they are. And then all of a sudden, like once he knows he has you, it gets more and more intense. He gets more and more mean because he knows that you'll never leave. And so almost with what you're describing kind of reminds me of that, especially when it comes down to like then going and getting surgery or then and going taking medicine. It's like first it starts off kind of casual, you can be whoever you want to be, and then it almost just becomes this more like intense and abusive relationship in a sense, and this infatuation where it's like, well, if I don't take it to the next level, I'm not going to really truly be who they want me to be or who I am. And so it's just this absolutely, like as you were saying, a toxic cult. And so moving away from that, going a little bit back to YAF, what is it like, because this my podcast is like female centered, and the goal is to really talk about, issues from a female but Christian perspective. And so, what is it like being the, national chairman, but as a female? Do you feel like almost you get a little bit more pushback in a sense because a lot of these issues sometimes centrally target women, such as abortion? I mean, that's the biggest one. Like I was saying earlier, people can't comprehend that I'm a woman but yet I don't believe in abortion, that I am 100% pro-life without any exceptions. People just can't seem to grasp that. Or at people, because people look at women as nurturers. They look at them as caring people. People can't comprehend that as women, I don't believe that you can go just be whoever you want to be. And people are almost taken aback more so than men. Because I feel like in this culture we live in, people look at a man and they just kind of expect him to, unless he's super gay, people just expect him to have conservative views. I've been with friends too who are liberal back in the past because we're not friends anymore because we can't be in this day and age. But they've looked at men and been like, that guy's 100% conservative because he's wearing like jeans and an American flag t-shirt. You know what I'm saying? It's like, how do you even know? You don't even know his name. Like, so what is it like being a woman in this position?
Yeah, when I first got announced publicly by National YAF that I was the chairwoman, I got more backlash from people who say they were conservatives, and I did not expect that whatsoever. A majority of them were saying that I was a DEI hire, and so it was either they were saying that or they were saying that like I'm trying to think of a polite way to say it, but they were saying basically that I like sucked my way or slept my way to the top,
Wow.
which is really insulting. Again, to hear this directly from people who have met me, have known me for a while. And what I also felt was ironic, they were like, oh yeah, Jasmyn's a really nice person, but she doesn't deserve this position. And it was just really confusing because that was what a lot of them were saying. A lot of them were like, "Oh, she's so kind, but she still shouldn't have this role." And so that was really shocking to me that people again who call themselves conservatives or Republicans or on the right or Christians, it was really shocking and kind of appalling to hear that directly from and hurtful to hear that from them. And then on campus in my role, also being a woman also has had a lot of like safety concerns.
Mm.
So the night before the Matt Walsh event, so the person who lived across from me in my dorm, was a guy who thinks he's a woman. He's like over 6 feet tall and wears like mini skirts. Like it's crazy. And so I never really interacted with him ever. But the night before the event, he started slamming his door. So I was like, okay, maybe he's doing this on purpose because, again, never any issues before. And so I was getting ready for bed. And again, he was slamming his door. So I decided to look out my peephole and like check out what he was doing. And so that time I looked out, he stopped and he stared at my door for a few seconds and then walked away. He was carrying like a bunch of stuff that was probably for the protest. It was like a big toolbox and like a flagpole.
Oh my
They were
gosh.
huge. And so exactly an hour later, he comes back because he's slamming his door again. And I look out of my peephole, and he's leaving his room again. And he stops and stares at my door again. But this time he comes over and puts his ear on it for several deliberate seconds, like he's listening in. And like at that time, I didn't have my door locked. My phone was across the room. So I couldn't get a video of it. So it was just so freaky because in that moment, this huge guy could have just opened the door and done anything. Because, he like it's very obvious that he's mentally like unstable, and has like some issues. So it was absolutely terrifying. And so the next morning, I literally was like wearing my pajamas. I went down to the housing administration and their room was covered in rainbow flags. And so that made me think, I was like, okay, I'm not going to tell them I'm in YAF. And so I told her what happened. And the way I like try to describe is like, oh, my organization's having an event and the person that lives across from me is reacting this way. And somehow, I don't even know how, she knew I was in YAF and she was like, well, people can react to your YAF event however they want to. And I started crying because she had no regard for my privacy or safety or whatever. And it just made, I don't even know how to describe how I still feel about this, but it's just like, I'm spending thousands of dollars to go here, and these people have no, they don't want to protect me. They don't care about me whatsoever. And, I'm doing so many things here at the university, and it's like, does it even really matter? Like, these people don't care about me. They only care about a certain kind of person. And so, yeah, that was that. And okay, exactly 1 year later, me and my boyfriend were going back to my dorm room. And so we got on the elevator, and it was a different dorm. So we got on the elevator, and out of nowhere, someone runs onto the elevator. I wasn't paying attention. I didn't really look to see who it was. And like I always do, I was like, okay, what floor do you want me to press?
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it was that guy from last year who again, it's been a whole year and I haven't even seen him in my new dorm. And apparently he lives there now. And so each time like he saw me when I was like walking, he'd start like huffing and puffing and getting super angry. And so this time, right after I asked what floor, he like slammed his hand on all of the buttons and it was like super freaky. So me and my boyfriend got off the elevator on my floor, went to my room to drop stuff off, and went back out. And a few hours later, when we went back to my room, there was a sign on my door that said, a transgender person peed here and no one was hurt. And so like, I was like, immediately as soon as I saw it, I was like, it has to be that guy. There's no one else it could be. And also, it's so disgusting is like, I don't think he peed on my floor or my door or whatever, but just regardless, that's super gross. And so did all the usual things like going to the police and reporting it and everything. And then they told me that they'd like, try and review camera footage. And I kept, trying to keep in touch with them to like see like, when are you guys going to have updates on this so we can figure out who did this? And so they said because that dorm didn't have any cameras in the hallway, they couldn't confirm who it was. But they did see the guy on the elevator, and they said that he got off on every single floor except for my floor. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so suspicious. And he easily, knowing what floor I lived on, knowing there were cameras on the elevator, he could have just used the stairs to get to my door. Like, I feel like there was just so much
just no way,
stuff. And the police really said that they weren't really going to look into it. And so then me and my boyfriend were flying a few days later and for one of our speaking events. And we were looking at Yik Yak, which is this anonymous social media platform. It's like focus, like each school has one, and you can talk to the people from the school. And someone had posted, there's a skinny white fascist and the black chick from YAF putting up flyers. And I turned to my boyfriend and I was like, I bet they're going to dox me by the end of the night. And within at least like a few minutes or so, someone said, yeah, her name is Jasmyn Jordan, and here's where she lives, and
Oh
posted
my
my full
gosh.
address on there. And yeah, I like heart was racing. I was like calling the police immediately and everything, and I was texting that to my friends so they could get it reported, because that's the only way you could get it taken down. It could be up until someone reports it. And it did get taken down. And so the police have the ability, because again, the app is anonymous, but the police have told us before, and we just like know from them and talking to like other people, they 100% have the ability to look and see who posts on Yik Yak, because they're able to like access the phone numbers or whatever associated with the account. And so they told me that they'd look into it. Then I didn't hear from them, and so I reached out again. They were like, oh, it doesn't reach a high the message didn't reach a high enough criminal activity threshold for them to look into who posted it, so they weren't going to look into it, despite
That's
them again
awful.
saying that they were going to help me figure all this stuff out. And so again, you know, anyone could have had my, because again, I still, you know, have no confirmation on who posted my address or who put the sign on my door. But I mean, if it's this guy, like, he could be passing my address to all his weird
Yeah.
little friends and all that kind of stuff. They could, you know, come to my, because, you know, it's like I have to go to my room to go to the shower, go to the bathroom, get to class. Like, they could literally be watching, waiting anytime to do anything, or like break into my room and steal my stuff or whatever. And then probably like a week later or so, me and my boyfriend were walking down the street, and we saw the guy and his group of friends who literally were all of them were like protesting at our events. We even got a video of him and most of his friends washing away chalk. It's an insane video. The like amount of effort they're like pushing and rubbing so hard to wash away our chalk, which violates school policy. And I sent that to the school. Don't know if they did
Yeah.
anything about it. But anyway, me and my boyfriend are walking, and the guy, and we can't move to the other side of the street. We have no choice but to walk by them. So I, you know, just take my phone out and like look down on it, not making eye contact with any of them. Of course, they were laughing as they walk by me, and they're like 5 feet or so behind me, and the guy yells out, "Stop effing reporting me, Jasmyn," and they all start bursting into cackles. And it just, again, is heartbreakingly devastating that I'm like, come on. Like, this guy is screaming at me. He's nonstop harassing me. He's stalking me, most likely doxing me, and, you know, probably putting the sign on my door. Yet no one is confirming or doing anything about it.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
and I'd been talking to YAF's lawyers about this. And so they had told me to try, because, you know, the University of Iowa police weren't being helpful. So they told me to try the city police. And so I went to the city police, the Iowa City Police, told them the whole situation, you know, waited for a while to get help. And they said that they couldn't do anything because it wasn't in their jurisdiction. So it's like, it's just so hard to get anyone to, like, you know, resolve this. And so I called the police after he had screamed at me. And so finally, they decided to do a no contact order. And, you know, it just took so long.
Forever. Way too
Yeah.
long.
So that's where we've been at. That was last year. But that was definitely just a very scary and disheartening with how the university was. Another time that there's been many times they've been frustrating, but another time was, so I got invited to speak from the House Judiciary Committee.
Wow.
And I got shared a lot of these events, you know, how people have been reacting, what we've been learning in class. I was sharing all of the times the university has violated our First Amendment. And I had like some people from the, like, it was really weird because when it got announced. Like, I don't know really how the school found out that I was speaking, but they were trying to be like super nice and be like, oh, let us know if you need anything, if you need like excuse letters or just anything. I'm like, okay, this is so weird. They're never this nice. And I even had someone come up to me after after I gave my testimony, who was like a representative of the university. I'd never like known this person before. She said again to like reach out if I needed help, and so I had hoped that, after giving this testimony on national television in front of our legislature, our national legislature, that, the school would be prompted to do something or care, they'd say something,
Mm-hmm.
especially since they were reaching out to me so much more beforehand. And so the only thing I heard back from the university the next day was an email from the Office of Student Accountability, who basically said I lied during the testimony because they said they had no record of the death threats that I mentioned, despite the fact that I have indeed sent them every single death threat. And then the people who are on the executive board for YAF before me have sent them every single death threat that they received. And so I sent all the same death threats again, and I sent this death threats that my predecessors had. I sent those too and heard nothing back from them.
Oh my gosh. That is so, I don't even know, I don't even know where to go from there. That is just so awful. It's so genuinely disheartening too that you reached out for help to people who don't even really know you, like know Jasmyn, like the police. Okay, or like people who are, put in place at the University of Iowa to help in these situations, because at the end of the day, a lot of these people who are coming at you like that, they don't know you. They don't know you as a person. Just like you were talking about earlier, that guy you were sitting with in class, he was getting to know you and clearly enjoyed speaking with you because you guys were having a conversation until he got to know something that is a facet of you, that's only a part of you. And then all of a sudden he was like, I can't even sit near this woman. I can't even talk to this woman. It's like, it's so disheartening. And I want to go back to, because I feel like you see this evil and you kind of expect it from these people, and I hate to say that, but it's kind of true in a way, like how you're talking about this 6-foot dude who thinks he's a chick. Clearly there's something mentally wrong there. And it's something where you kind of expect that from him. Now, it doesn't make it good, it doesn't make it right, but you expect it. However, going back to what you were saying from conservatives, you were getting backlash from, our own people. It's like I just had an episode about this. I talked about this a little bit a few episodes ago. I'm seeing this trend and I don't like it, where and even Megyn Kelly talked about it a little bit, where she was talking to young conservative women and they were struggling to find a partner because they were like, oh, I actually enjoy working. I want to work. And conservative men are like, women shouldn't work. They should be at the home doing the cooking and the cleaning and all this kind of stuff. And there's absolutely no problem if you want to be a stay-at-home wife or a stay-at-home mom. There's absolutely no problem in that. If that's what God has called you to do, then you should be doing that. If you should be doing what God has called you to do. But clearly, for you, for example, God is opening doors for you with YAF and with your future, where it's like, I would be an idiot not to go through this door that God is opening for me, And if God is opening this stay-at-home wife or the stay-at-home mom role for you, and that's the door he's opening, that's great. Or for example, I'm a mom and I stay at home with my daughter. But when we live in Pella, my husband and I, when we moved to Pella, the local Christian radio station reached out to me and offered me a job. It's like, okay, that is clearly a sign like, wow, that's amazing. That's something that I've been wanting to do. And it's like, God is clearly opening this door. I didn't even apply for this job. I had never even heard of them, and they came to me. And I hate this trend recently where it's like conservative guys just are almost like trying to rewind time, where they don't believe like women should have jobs or even sometimes positions of authority. I'm sorry, and I know I'm going off, and I know this wasn't on the questions list, but you brought it up, so I'm asking you about it. What is your reaction to that? Are you seeing the same thing that I'm seeing of these conservative guys, like almost not liking these empowered women? Because I feel like they almost think too, where Women can't be empowered and submissive to their husbands at the same time. And we can. It's like, have you actually ever read the Bible? There are so many powerful women in the Bible, so many women who stand. I mean, let's not forget that Jesus came to this earth through a woman. And that's how God chose to bring his son into the world. It wasn't with some mighty chariot. It wasn't with the men of the world hoisting him up. He chose a young woman and said, "You are blessed. I am blessing you with my son." So going back to the question, because then I went on a whole rant, because then I started to get really angry. Are you seeing this with conservative guys where they're just not wanting women to work? They're not really encouraging women in positions of power. What are you seeing, especially going to college?
Yeah, I've seen that exact same trend, and I think it's extremely frustrating. I also think it's just absolutely ridiculous because it's like, what do you because they obviously want a woman who is a virgin, but it's like, what do you expect the woman to do when she isn't dating someone, when she doesn't have a child? I saw a post literally relating to this. There was like, do you want them to just sit there and twiddle their thumbs at
Yeah.
home in their parents' basement? And I think, working and going to college and just so many other opportunities before having kids can really teach you so many life skills and help you be a better mother. I think there's nothing wrong with a woman working beforehand. And then, she can always take a pause on her career to take care of the kids and then, resume that once her kids are grown up. Like, I feel like it's just such a narrow-minded focus, and it again, is very unbiblical and very frustrating to see so many people following this path. There's just like so on both sides. You have the transgender stuff on the left, and then on the right, you have people who, I guess it is, a gender issue with both sides of the spectrum. And then on the right, you have men who think, women shouldn't be able to do this. It's definitely very difficult to find people who really, believe in the balance of what a woman can do.
Well, have you ever heard of the show? I think it's based. I'm pretty sure it's based off a book as well, The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
I'm like, when guys who are conservatives act like this is why people think that this is what conservatives want, is The Handmaid's Tale, is just us, like, is just women being like absolutely non-important, non-existent, other than baby factories. And so, anyways, I just had to ask your opinion on that, since you had said that so many conservatives had, kind of been disheartened by your position of authority. And so, fast forwarding to a more exciting and more fun, more lighthearted question. Who have you been the most starstruck to meet? I mean, you've had to have met, a lot of crazy people. Who have you been like, okay, wow, this is really happening. I'm really in this room with this person. I'm meeting this person. I'm talking to this person. Who was it?
Oh man, it's so hard because I feel that way with all of our speakers and then people who have spoken at conferences. I would say one of the most pivotal meetups that I've done. So, like I told you, the whole issue with the Black Sparta group chat. So that was right before a Kellyanne Conway event, and so that had prompted me to come up with a question for Q&A because yeah, I don't think I had done a Q&A before at one of our YAF events. I did one before at conferences. And so when it was my turn to ask the question, I asked her something like, what can we do to bring more women and people of color to the conservative movement? And I had met with her like right beforehand to get a picture, and she had remembered my name. I thought that was so cool. And one of the first things she said was, "You don't let what anyone says define you. You let what God says define you." And I absolutely love that. And then she was saying to just keep doing what I'm doing, bringing people in, and it was just really inspirational, especially because we had some very like mean people to her throughout our Q&A session, and also during her speech. This one guy just kept, we were about to throw him out because he wouldn't stop heckling during the event. So it was really nice to get to have such a very eloquent and professional response from her, and it was just really motivating too, to again, like, I definitely have never been deterred from anyone's like bullying or harassment, but still just having someone especially a female, such empowering words to say that have stuck with me throughout all of my years now that I'm about to graduate. I'm trying to think of some other. It was really cool my freshman year to meet Ben Shapiro, because I know he's not speaking as much on campus, but I got to meet him my freshman year at Iowa State when their chapter was hosting him. Our University of Iowa chapter went over to help out since it was such a big event, and it was really cool to get to meet him, especially since he's like, one of the most famous conservative speakers. So that was really cool too.
Does he talk that fast even when he's just talking to
Yeah.
us everyday people? So, what is your advice to, how do I phrase? What is your advice to young people? Because, like you just said, you're like, I don't struggle with that sometimes. I mean, obviously you've had your struggles, but it's like when people are coming and protesting, you're like, you kind of build up, a bit of a scab to it, if you will. You kind of build up that defense. What is your advice to the young women listening to my show who are either entering college or maybe even in college or in high school, and they're really starting to get to have these conversations or really starting to get to see people, yelling at other people for their beliefs, and they're not sure if they want to stand up? What is your advice to them?
My biggest pieces of, I'm trying to think, it's like two things. Okay, one of them is to never change yourself for anyone or change what you believe for anyone. Always stand firm and stand grounded. I think, again, that really helps you grow. Like, definitely, it's hard to think about my college years because they've been so, so painful. But at the same time, it's also opened up so many opportunities. I think it's very honorable to be able to stand and show that you took a stand with all the things being thrown at you versus because I've had people tell me, people who said they were conservative, and all of them have happened to be women, tell me that they were afraid to, or they didn't want to be friends with me because they saw all the attacks that I've got, all the thousands of followers that I've lost, and all the other harassment. They didn't want to go through that. And I still don't even know how I'm supposed to react to that. I've had that told to me at least 2 or 3 times. But again, I think no matter what, and you're also not alone too when you stand for your beliefs. Even if there's not people on your campus, there might be. You just have to find them, or there's just so many people you can connect with, whether that be online, maybe friends back home. But there's definitely at least someone. And then my other piece of advice would be to keep doing what you love to do, and don't let anyone change that for you. Because I didn't really, coming in, I had so many different expectations on what I was going to pursue, and now I'm pursuing like journalism and writing, and that actually has been something that's been in my life that I've never really realized how much I did with that. And so I know with Iowa being, the writing university, there were sometimes I did drop a class because it was poetry. I absolutely love poetry, but there's so many people on the right who are like, oh, poetry is just leftist garbage or whatever. But that's something, I know I haven't had time to do it because I've been so busy now, but it's something I'd like to work on in the future. And I did there's my first advanced poetry class that I was taking. On the first day they started talking about a whole bunch of LGBTQ themes and stuff, so I dropped that and swapped it for another class. But even if there are those instances where you just don't want to be surrounded by people on the left who are obviously radical and against your beliefs, or there's people on the right who are discouraging you from liking anime or watching poetry or doing all the things you love, I think you should still stick to them if it's what your passion is.
And then my last question for you is, how does somebody get involved with YAF, whether they are a college student or maybe they are, an adult watching this and they want to either get involved or give, how do people go about that? And then where can people, follow you and keep up with all your stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, so with YAF, there's our YAF TV YouTube channel where you can watch live streams of speaking events or conferences, or you can watch the previously recorded episodes too. If you go to the YAF website, there's a section there that says how to donate to the organization. Then also you can start your own YAF chapter if there's not one currently at your school. Also, if you're middle school, high school, or college student, there's plenty of conferences to attend as well. And then I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and LinkedIn. Jasmyn Jordan. My Instagram and Twitter are hey, it's Jasmyn J.
Well, awesome. Well, like I said before we even started to record, it's was so amazing that you could do this episode, and just hearing about the stuff that, that you've been through. I really hope that it encourages others, because not only, have you been through that stuff and lived to tell the tale, you're also living proof that there are blessings and benefits to, standing up for what you believe in and standing up for what's right. And sometimes it can be difficult because it can feel like you're completely alone when, people are coming at you and people are, doing all that stuff with you. But having a group of people, like you found with YAF, or just hearing your story and hearing, your testimony, I think it'll be really encouraging. And so I really appreciate you coming on to my podcast today. And this was Let's Talk, episode 21. Let's talk about YAF.